Whew. How are y'all doing? You doing good? Have a good weekend? Yeah, except for that football game, right? Yeah, I know. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something else, right? So I first of all want to thank you all for being here tonight to join us in a conversation that I think is very timely and in a conversation that I think happens on campus all too often, but we get to showcase this now in a public light. So thank you first and foremost for being here today and supporting Stand Against Hate Week, which is going on all week. And part about Standing Against Hate is really talking about the things that really matter to us, and that is our own personal identity and our own personal formation. So let's begin that conversation tonight, all right? Yeah, let's go. We're tired. It's class. We had class, you know. So a couple people that I want to thank before we get started that had really an instrumental place in making this event happen. So there's a list of them here, and I'm just going to read those folks off really quick. The Department of Film, Television, and Theater, the Institute for Latino Studies, Multicultural Student Programs and Services, the Gender Studies Program, WABRUDA, Latino Student Alliance, Men Against Sexual Violence, the newly named Men Against Sexual Violence, the Sociology Club, and then Duncan Hall. So what I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to bring an officer up from Men Against Sexual Violence that's going to introduce our speaker. His name is Derek Coons, and he is a junior who is joining us here today. So why don't you welcome Derek up to the stage, please.
Thank you for that introduction, Manny. And Manny, he is aptly named because he is the man. That is for sure. Yes. And as he mentioned, I am an officer in the recently renamed Men Against Sexual Violence. For years, we were MAV, Men Against Violence. And we'd like to rename our club to say what we really do focus on is sexual violence. You know, and one of the things I really like about that club, Massive, is that we focus on the men in our community. All too often, the conversations revolving around sexual violence has to deal with the females, the victims. And you know, that's just not right. Our goal in Massive is to kind of shift that conversation away from the females and onto the males and think, what can we do as men to prevent sexual violence here in our community? You know, one of the key tenets of Massive is that we should be proud to call ourselves men. And you know, that's not always easy. When you think about the way masculinity is portrayed, you know, in music, in hip-hop culture, in sports, you know, you're thinking about a tough guy, you know, doesn't show any pain, doesn't show any emotion, treats his women like objects. And, you know, if that's what we define as masculinity, then you know, no, we should not be proud of that. And that's why it's important that we redefine what it means to be a man, and we begin that conversation. All too often, hyper-masculinity, the kind of masculinity that is portrayed in the media, is confused for real masculinity. And that's why it's so important that we take a step back as students and as men, and we think about what it really means to be a man. And you know, it's not always easy to do that either. You know, it's not a very manly thing to talk about your emotions, to, you know, hit up your buddies, say, hey, you know, let's talk about our, you know, our feelings right now. That's not a manly thing. You know, that right there proves that our views, our perceptions of masculinity invade even our thoughts. And with no further ado, I want to move on to introducing our speaker. Our speaker is going to be instrumental tonight in helping us begin that conversation and help us rebrand what it means to be a man and what masculinity really is. Carlos Andres Gomez is an award-winning poet, actor, and writer from New York City. A star of HBO's Russell Simmons Presents Deaf Poetry and Spike Lee's #1 movie, Inside Man, alongside Denzel Washington, he is the author of Man Up, Reimaging Modern Manhood, released by Gotham Books, an imprint of Penguin. It's a memoir that seeks to challenge the limiting and destructive narrative of machismo that inundates what so many young males are taught. With no further ado, Mr. Carlos Andres Gomez.
Thanks, brother. Give it up for Derek and Emmanuel and everybody. If you currently have or have ever had a grandmother that you love very much, make some noise. Yeah. On 3, shout out the nickname of that grandmother. 1, 2, 3. Don't you love hearing nicknames? Did someone say grandmother? That's a lie. What? You ever see those like old like British films, like 17th century like period films? They're like, hello mother, hello father. And you're like, nobody ever talked like this, ever. Like what? So my grandmother, who I called abuelita, which means granny in Spanish basically, she passed away 2 summers ago. And she was 102 years old, according to the youngest of her 4 official birth certificates. Are there any Latinos, Latinas here? They're like, yeah. Everyone else like, that's identity fraud. Like, what? Raise your hand if you have a grandparent who has more than 1 birth certificate. Be honest. Okay, there we go. Someone's like, I can't raise my hand for this. Okay, cool. So in the time, speaking about like gender ideals or gender expectations, in the time that my grandmother grew up, she lived in Colombia, up in the mountains, in Antioquia, in Medellin, right? If you were a girl and you were not married by 17 years old, you were considered old to get married. Think about that for a second, right? Can you imagine this? So my grandmother, when she was 17, her and a lot of her friends, if you were not married yet and you had a parent who had enough money, they'd go down to the official government post, they'd bribe a government official, and they get a newly created birth certificate. It'd be real. Just bribe somebody. And she did this 3 times because she didn't get married until she was 31 years old, according to one of her birth certificates, okay? So my grandmother was anywhere between 102 years old and 111 when she passed away. And the reason I want to welcome her spirit into this room right now is because she was one of those people who always made me feel like I was enough. Do you know what I mean when I say enough? I love how you just nodded immediately. That was beautiful. You know what I'm talking about, right? So I want you to welcome the spirit, the energy, right, into the room of somebody who has always been a champion by your side. It could be a mentor, it could be a coach, it could be your priest, it could be your best friend, it could be your grandparent, but somebody who makes you feel like you're worthy, like you're enough, like you're important, like you're irreplaceable, like you're beautiful, right? Because that can be a pretty heroic and revolutionary act in this world, right? So this is for my grandmother, and it goes like this. 8 months shy of 100, and still filled with the wonderment of a child, my grandmother is a revelation tumbling in on itself. Songs and secrets snaked into the creases of her smile. Her 63-year-old hunches washing dishes in the sink. Her knees in 2nd grade tear through the living room like a derailed train car. Prayer-swollen hips from her wedding photos. Call up to a rosary. Ask for life. And I am molded clay from the hands with which she now holds my chubby face. I am small and curious. Ay, mijito, my dear son, she squeals. Tan bello, so beautiful. These are the words she uses to anchor each day. And I am jealous of how she does, the abandon with which she soaks it all up. Her face is a yawning earthquake of tremor and pulse. Her hands, the tectonic plates of her body's fierce hope, her head, stuttering out music as it tries to focus on just one thing. Now she takes in my sister. Awkward middle school face of pockmarked acne in her hands. Ay, mijita, oh my dear daughter, tan bella, so beautiful. My sister smiles. She is truly beautiful for the first time in her life. Wears a sash of blushing cheeks. Mijito, my dear child, tan bello, so beautiful. In a world of envy-fueled violence, where hate explodes out of our scars like weeds, the lessened versions of ourselves spreading like wildfire, my grandmother is a revelation tumbling in on itself, a repeating gospel on loop, where each person she meets is a child, returns the miracle and amazement we left in our Velcro shoes, awakens our bodies with the suddenness of her eyes. Everything is beautiful. Keloid and awkward is beautiful. Adolescence is beautiful. Men, for the first time, can be called beautiful. Her hands reach for the sun as though it were food, a cloud. As we walk, she shakes, awed by the emerald hue of fresh grass hugging her apartment building like jealous, thirsty arms. My grandmother is the ripest hallelujah everyone is a child, is a dear daughter, a dear son, has a story and roots and branches twisting embrace through the sterile bars of a subway car, picking it up, where every object, moment, everything in the sparkling gasp of an earth is not just beautiful. It is more than beautiful. It is too beautiful. It is so, so beautiful. So when I was 6 years old, life was good. Was anyone else here, like, was life good for anyone else when they were 6? Raise your hand if life was good for you when you were 6 years old. It's a pretty great time, right? Like, you have some, like, pretty solid motor function, right? You know what I mean? You're not just, like, hitting, like, you see, like, little babies try to, like scratch their face or just, like, you're like, oh, my God, whoa. You ever seen, like, babies do this? You're 6 years old, it's not happening anymore, hopefully, right? You know, you don't have student loans, hopefully, when you were 6. So you were like a baby genius. You didn't have taxes. You weren't like applying to jobs or thinking about your summer internship. You were just 6 years old, right? What were you worried about? Everyone's like, I don't know. What was I worried about? Yeah, Captain Crunch, cartoons, acting a fool. Yeah, you can just say it. You're like, no, I was studying. I was getting ready to get into Notre Dame. Okay, cool. All right. Maybe you weren't the same 6-year-old I was. So when I was 6 years old, I was feeling pretty good. And then one day it seemed like everything, it felt like the rug got pulled out from under me. Anybody have a moment like this where like there was a moment in your life you're like, I can picture this moment right here where something shifted, where I started to see the world differently. And there was like a series of events, and a lot of them seemed to all happen around when I was 6 years old, where I became aware of something that I had not previously seemed to have any conscious awareness of. And the revelation happened one day playing YMCA soccer when I was 6 years old, where most revelations happen, right? Have you all seen 6-year-olds play soccer? Right? Any of y'all ever 6-year-old playing soccer? Yep, exactly. It's universal, okay? It transcends race, nationality, religion, ethnicity, gender. It's always the same, right? Because if you've seen it before, you've seen it once, you've seen it a million times. There's a ball, right? There are 53 kids huddled around it like a swarm of bees, right? Everyone's just like kicking each other in the shins. Somebody accidentally hits the ball, goes bouncing the field, and everyone just like runs after it, right? It was no different in 1988 when I was 6 years old, okay? It was the exact same. Like I said, transcend time and space, right? So somebody hits the ball, goes rolling down the field. I'm 6 years old, so my head's a third of my body proportionally, right? Anyone here a physics major? Any physics people? Okay? You're like, no, physics people don't come to poetry things. Okay, cool, fine, all right. There's no physics people here. All right, so I'm running down the field full speed like this. My head's leading my whole body. I'm running full speed. I trip. I don't care if you're majoring in physics or not. What do y'all think happened? It hurts. It does really hurt. I did a tooth plan. Y'all know what a tooth plan is? I was like, oh, that was really, thank you. That was really empathetic. You didn't mean that. You're laughing. No, so I did a tooth plan in the middle of the field. And I'm sitting there like this weeping, like pile of 6-year-old boy in the middle of the field. I'm hysterically crying. And it hurts a lot, right? But I'm looking around, I see everyone laughing at me, and some people are like, oh my gosh, and some people have their hands over their mouth, and I look up, and I see my hero coming to save me, right? I see my coach sprinting towards me in slow motion. I see him running towards me. I see all this concern in his face, and he's running faster and faster. And instinctively, you know, like I don't see my mom anywhere. I don't see my dad anywhere. They were here a second ago. I don't see him right now. And I'm looking up, and I'm putting my hands up, waiting to get pulled up into his arms and have him hug me and tell me everything's okay, right? Right? You're like, I don't know. I don't want to answer you anymore. Okay, cool. And he walks over, and he goes, stop crying. What are you, a little baby? What are you, a little boy? I was like, yeah. He's like, get back out there, man up. I was like, and I was like, man up? Anyone here ever seen a 6-year-old told to man up? People got real shy for a second. They're like, oh, I don't want to raise my hand for this. You can be, no, I'm not saying you did it. I'm just saying seen somebody do it. Saw a person do it in public, and you were there, like, peripherally. Okay, cool? Anyone here, everyone's hand goes up now, right? Anybody who identifies as a man here, any of you ever told to man up when you were 6 years old? Has anyone here ever met a 6-year-old man? You may have, oh, sorry, let me rephrase. You may have met a man who acts like a 6-year-old. I'm saying a 6-year-old man. Those are different things, right? Different things, right? I've never met a 6-year-old man. You know what I mean? But we're telling a 6-year-old to man up. And I thought about this. I was like, if I'm running full speed in front of 200 people, I do a tooth plant in the middle of a field, it's miraculous I didn't lose all of my top and bottom teeth. If I can't cry there, when am I allowed to express any emotion? I was a super deep 6-year-old, as you can tell. I was getting ready for Notre Dame. And then I had this other thought. I said, I noticed that a similar thing happened with my eyes when I watched my favorite movie, which is probably well before your time, so you've probably never heard of it. It's called E.T., about this alien with a weirdly shaped head, right? Who rides a bicycle across the moon. And so all 3 times I watched E.T., I cried as much as when I fell on that field. And I noticed how my cousins would react was actually similar when I watched E.T. And I started to think, So I can't show emotion then. I can't show emotion and watch TV. And then I started to be aware of different things. I started to notice different things that were being enforced about the person that I was. So I'm 32 years old now, right? You all, well, unless we knew each other in kindergarten, you're not telling me and you're sitting in the audience. You didn't know me when I was 6 years old, right? Did you? Okay. You're like, I don't know who you are. Okay, cool. Maybe I didn't know each other from a year ago, but we feel like we know each other for 35 years. Okay, so when I was 6 years old, I was this real sensitive kid, as you can tell from the E.T. story, right? I was very sensitive. I was a nurturer. I was the kind of kid, I get those, you know those little, tabletop pies that they sell in elementary school lunchrooms for some reason, right? They have, no nutritional value whatsoever, but they taste amazing and cause bad things for your health eventually if you keep eating them. Right? They have those. Every time I'd get one, I'd want to, cut it in half, and I want to, share it with somebody. I always wanted to share. If somebody was crying, I'd walk over and be like, hey, man, it's all right, man. You can get them next time. I was, a real nurturing, thoughtful, expressive, caring, tender kid. And it was right around 6 years old, with this event with soccer, watching E.T. for the 4th time, I started to notice that it felt like everyone around me was telling me that I had to stop being the person that I was. Can anyone relate to that, whether it was for 2 minutes, 2 weeks, 2 years, where you felt like you had to be something different than who you inherently were? And it's real subtle, too. You know what I mean? Isn't it those subtle comments that can be the most damaging and the most hurtful? You know what I mean? My father walks by and he's like, stop crying. Or he walks over and pats me on the stomach and he's like, watch that. You know what I mean? You know those little comments that can be so damaging for the rest of your life, right? And notice that every year it seemed to escalate as I got older. It was 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old. And then I entered that wonderful time that we all look back on with incredible nostalgia called puberty, when everything, was just fun and free-flowing. And it seemed to reach this fever pitch. I got to middle school and I was having a full-on identity crisis. I was like, everything I am seems to be wrong, okay? And it seems like the person everyone's telling me to be is the diametric opposite of who I am. So I came up with a very simple solution. And what do y'all think it was? Real easy solution. Any guesses? Change. Yes. I said, if the person I am is wrong, the real easy solution is I will just be the person I'm supposed to be, right? And then all the problems will go away. And then I'll have no more conflict, and I'll have no more anguish, and I'll have no more all these identity crises I'm going through, right? I said, it'll all be solved. So I said, okay, so I enter high school, and I'm sort of practicing different things. I mean, in middle school, we're all sort of practicing being different people, right? But by the time I get to high school, I'm firmly trying to mimic the guys who got the most attention in school, right? So it'd be like the guy on the basketball team. My man Kamor on the basketball team, he walked down the hallway. He was a junior. He was captain of the basketball team. And everyone would be like, oh my gosh, Kamor, you're so amazing. He'd just be walk down and be big. So I started walking down the hallways. And people would be like, Carlos, what's going on, man? How are you? Like, great to see you. I used to have like a big smile, be cheesing all the time, be walking around like, hey, man, oh, happy Monday. Okay, cool, man. You need some help with your homework? And then people would be like, yo, Carlos, what's up, man? I came back sophomore year, and I was like, what's up? I'd walk into class like 15 minutes late. My teacher would be like, Mr. Gomez, can we help you? I'd be like, I don't know, can you? The other educators are like, oh my God. Yeah, I was that kid. I was that kid. You know what I mean? I asked for a bench press for Christmas. Y'all know what a bench press is? I'd sit in my basement. I'd have my shirt off. I gave up my room upstairs. I literally lived in the basement. I'd just sit there, put on as much weight as I could. I'd listen to DMX's first album, It's Dark and Hell is Hot, probably before your time. And I'd sit there and I'd bark and I'd be on the bench and I'd be pumping iron and I'd walk around and I'd imagine I was like king of the world and I was dominating and conquering everything. And I was unbreakable. And I was a fortress that could never be defeated. And so I'm 17 years old. And I've been perfecting this guy. Right? And I was certain that I had life solved. Anyone else here feel like they had life solved at 17? Be honest. You don't have to be all humble. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Some honest people. I was at a show like 2 nights ago, and like nobody raised their hand. I'm like, somebody's lying, or you're the humblest room I've ever been in. Like that's, I'm not saying you still think that. I'm just saying. So I was certain I had life solved. I had like checked off all these things on this like rubric of masculinity as I knew it. Right? So one thing. I was captain of the basketball team. I was vice president of my class. We had this thing called superlatives at our school. You know superlatives with yearbooks? That like incredibly like destructive social thing. Like how does that still happen? Like how can there even be a conversation about like bullying or hierarchy and superlatives still exist? Anybody else like wonder this? I go to high schools all the time like, oh yeah, I'm most attractive. I'm most likely to succeed. I'm like, this is horrible. Like what? It's like the problem of the world. So I was voted ladies' man, which I saw as like the biggest evidence of just winning masculinity. And then I was really upset because I was runner-up for best strut. Now check out this strut. Hold on a second. Check out this strut. Check out this strut. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Wait. Take another look at it. Take another look. Runner-up? Are you kidding me? I was mad, okay? So I'm 17 years old. I'm completely stoic. I'm completely shut down. I got like my six-pack worked out. I'm sitting there almost killing myself, bench pressing, like literally risking my life a few times, dropping too much weight on my chest that nobody found out about, but that was happening probably every other night, right? But I'm doing that in my basement. And I feel like I have everything figured out. And what do y'all think was happening inside that nobody saw? Any guesses? Crying, yeah. What was that? Questioning. Oh. I'm going to take it a step further than questioning. Lost. Lost. Yeah, any other guesses? Conflict. Ooh. If you ever try to act like somebody you're not, that is like the worst feeling in the world, right? You're like looking over your shoulder like, oh my gosh, I hope somebody, you're like walking around like, yeah, no, I got this. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like you're just like, it's exhausting. I was conflicted. I was in anguish. I was hurting. I was just like feeling all this turmoil inside. I was crying, screaming for a reprieve from this person I built myself into. And that day there was a mandatory assembly. Where this is reaching its height, its peak, its climax. There's this poet coming to my school by the name of Martin Espada. This Nuyorican, Puerto Rican, New Yorker poet. And of course, you know, poetry, this is like pre-deaf poetry when poetry got really cool, you know what I mean? I go to like a high school in the South Bronx now, I'm like, who's a poet? And like everyone raises their hand. Like, I'm a poet. Awesome. You know what I mean? Like 8 years earlier, I'd be like, raise your hand if you're a poet, and the whole room would just laugh for like 10 minutes. And that would be like it. Nobody raised their hand, right? So I walk in 10 minutes late. I'm with two guys from the basketball team. You know, I'm like one of the cool guys. So I sit in the back row. You know, I put my foot up on a chair. I call it manspace.com. I don't know if you've ever been to this website before, right? Do you have buses here, public buses, public transit? You know, a man's like, 5'6", 112 pounds, and he like opens his legs up and sits on like 9 seats. And then a woman comes on with like 19 kids, and she like crawls into the corner and just like standing there like this. And you're like, dude, are you serious? This has happened in Indiana. This happened in South Bend. Unfortunately, it does. I know it's an epidemic. It's really an epidemic. In New York, it's and it's always like a 13-year-old kid. He's just like, I got this. And you're like, what? Come on, man. Stop. So I sit in my chair. I put my feet up, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, poetry. Ah. And the secret that I'd been keeping, one of many, was that I'd actually been tinkering with poetry for a few months. But I wasn't talking about it, obviously, because that would have completely, I had to keep that real undercover, right? So I'm sitting there, and I never heard poetry really that I'd liked, especially someone reading out of a book. I'd never heard poetry that really resonated with me, right? And this man starts reading from his book called Imagine the Angels of Bread. And it starts to make my body feel funny. Y'all know the movie Alien? There's an alien that moves around this, and it comes out of the body, right? It felt like something was moving in my body, while this poet was talking. And then it started, and so I was kind of I wasn't sure if it was something I'd eaten. I was kind of moving around. I was like, oh, I'm kind of moving around. And my friend's like, are you good? I was like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Kind of stretching. I started to get out of my manspace.com pose, and I sort of got back into my seat, and I feel this thing kind of move up through my chest, through my torso, and up. I feel something kind of stuck in my throat, and I'm like, oh. My friend's like, what are you doing? I was like, no, I'm sorry. I'm good. And then I felt this thing sort of move up through the back of my head, and I started to feel this little pinch behind my eyes, and I had an allergic reaction to the poetry where water started to come down my face. And my boy was like, yo, are you crying over some poetry? And I was like, no, I was like, pollen right now is crazy. He was like, yeah, it's January. I was like, mold is crazy right now. And I had this moment I like to call the kneeling on the chair moment. And it's this. You ever have a moment in your life where you feel like you have to do two diametrically opposite things, but they're life and death stakes on both? And you can only pick one. I'd spent 17 and a half years building myself into this cartoon, this caricature of machismo, toxic, robotic masculinity. I'd built myself into the alpha dog, king, broken man. And I felt like if I had one more person that saw me crying over some poetry, I was going to lose all that work. I spent over a decade doing it meticulously, hiding all of who I was for 10 years. So I immediately turned to walk out of the room. And right as my back turned, it was like I couldn't turn the volume down on that poetry. And I'm hearing these words come out of Martín Espada's mouth, and I had this realization that if I miss one syllable, one breath of what he is reciting, I feel like my soul is going to die. So I turn back around, I kneel on the chair, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to give him 10 seconds. Okay, I'll wait till the next stanza. Okay, I'll give him one more poem. And before I know it, I blink. I look up. 40 minutes have passed, and I am in the back of the auditorium weeping. Like ugly crying. You know, the snot, it's all over in your mouth and on this. It was a mess, right? And everyone around me was just like. And Martín Espada is closing his book and walking off the stage. So I just sort of I just walk up there. And I buy a copy of his book, and I don't say one word to him, and he looks at me and he's like, you're a poet. I was like, and he grabs the book out of my hand before I can answer, and he writes, Para Carlos, poeta del futuro. For Carlos, poet of the future. And he hands me the book back. And up to that point in my life, I only had one goal. No backup plan, one goal. And that was to be the starting shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls. I had nothing else on tap. And the universe was like, oh, you want to be a professional basketball player? You want to be the next Michael Jordan? Yeah, you're actually going to do this now. You're welcome. There you go. And then it opened the door to the universe and just kicked me through it. You know what I mean? The next week, I went to my first open mic. I went to my first open mic with the only kid in my school who was the only open poet in my school, right? Poetry was an alternative lifestyle in 1999, right? It was like an alternative lifestyle. You couldn't just do it in the open, you know what I mean? People were like, whoa, you're a poet. Oh, hey, cool, man. All right, have a nice life. Take care of yourself. All right, man. So he was the only open poet in my school. He also happened to be the only openly gay student at my school, my friend Andrew. So I go to the open mic, you know, and I have, you know, some stuff I've been writing, and I meet these like 35 writers who started to talk about a spectrum of gender. I was like, wait, time out. A spectrum? I was like, two options don't fit into a spectrum. That doesn't make any sense. And they just like laughed for like 2 minutes. And I was like, no. I was like, no, okay. So there's like John Wayne on this side, and then there's Marilyn Monroe on this side, and you got to pick one. And they just like put their arm around me, and they're like, okay, come on, sorry. It's okay, come on. And I started to meet people who were like, yeah, I'm actually trans. I'm actually gender nonconforming. I'm actually genderqueer. I'm actually, and people started giving me all, and my brain just literally almost exploded and fell off my body. And they were like, yeah, and this whole idea you have about men being one thing is just really outdated. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, why can't you be all the things that you are and just be a dude? I was like, yeah, and like cry when I get emotional and express my feeling. Oh, you're serious? Okay, that's interesting. Okay. And it started to really like mess with my head. I was like, people were talking about it, like it was just like, yeah, who cares, man? You're a human being, dude. And I was like, oh gosh, okay, this is kind of, it was like the most provocative, revolutionary, incendiary thing I'd ever encountered in my entire life. That was one of the first two major turning points in my life that put me on this path of reconsidering what I had thought a man was supposed to be. The major shift, though, happened 6 years later, 6 years after Martina Espada visited my high school when I was 23 years old. Another wonderful place where revelations happen, right? 23 years old, 5 minutes after 3 in the morning in a nightclub in Lower Manhattan, right? So just think of the hottest nightclub in downtown South Bend, which is? Everyone has one. What's this place called? Feeve. Yeah, Feeve. It's the hot spot. Feeve. Amazing. So picture you're at the Feeve. What time does it close? Don't say 11:45. You're going to make me cry. I'm sure. 3. Okay. Some of you are like, what's the Feeve? Okay, you got to talk to whoever was all yelling at the same time. I just found this out. Okay, so it's a good approximation. So it's that moment. It's like 5 after 3. It's that moment they turn the lights on. They're like, you know, you don't got to go home, but you got to get the heck out of here, right? So they turn the lights on. And maybe the Feeve is like this too, you know, some brilliant architect, interior design, non-expert, put one little door in the back of the room where 8,000 people all file out of at the same time. You know, that's how it works, right? Just like provoking chaos. So me and my 2 friends are walking out of the club, and we're 10 feet away from the back doors of the club. And I'm walking out, and my shoulder bumps against this guy's chest. It's not like a hard, like, you know what I mean? But he bumps into my shoulder, my chest, he kind of falls backwards. I don't know how this narrative usually works in South Bend. You probably just like shake hands and like share a non-alcoholic beer and then study or something, you know, I don't know. But in New York, this is a very well-worn trope, right? So the guy falls backwards, starts taking his jewelry off, he rips his watch off, he's like, what's up? Y'all ever seen this moment happen on a Saturday night? You say this past weekend? It's like last night. I don't know. I like to say that body is the source of the greatest and the least wisdom we are capable of. And this story exemplifies both. You ever have your body do something or like a word comes out of your mouth and you don't give it permission to do that? You know what I mean? Like you get really upset and you're like, no, I don't even agree with what just came out of my mouth, okay? I don't agree with it. And you're like, okay, I hate you, I'm never talking. So you know what I mean? Like, So before I have one thought go through my head, the guy steps hard to me, the circle opens up, and I'm just like, I love that moment. That was like literally, you could hear that like gasp in the room, right? I take a hard step forward, and we're like grilling each other, you know what I mean? Like our noses are like 1.5 inches away from each other, like waiting for one of us to cross that like imaginary line that you don't know where the line is until we all know where the line is. You know that moment? You know what I'm saying? And so like my two friends have the reluctant friend moment, right? Where they're like, okay, we're doing this. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? So they step in behind me, you know what I mean? He steps up, his 7 friends fall in behind him. Are there any math people here? There are no physics people here. Maybe math people? Arithmetic people? So the circle opens up. There's always that dude on the side who's like, yo, 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 punch him in the face. And you're like, that's awesome, man, thanks. That's great. Great contribution to society. You know, some guys, his like phone eyes, like, I'm gonna put this on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, yo, punch him. You know what I mean? And we're sitting there, nose to nose. You can cut the tension with a knife. Everyone's sitting there. You can cut the tension with like a knife through thick butter. And I always wonder, like, anybody who's seen this moment, it's very similar, right? Like people are grilling each other. People are puffing their chest and their shoulders out like they're like all swollen. They're sitting there like this. And we're like, it's a really tense moment, right? Like your heart is going 1,000 miles an hour and you might forget to blink and breathe both, right? But it's also kind of like an intensely homoerotic moment too, right? Right? You know what I'm talking about, people who've seen this moment before. I always wonder, like, what would happen if someone just, like, leaned forward and was just like, like, what would that do to the whole moment, right? But I wasn't, like, on the Inception 8th level above the next level, so I didn't go there. So I'm sitting there, nose to nose. Everyone's waiting for one person to cross the line. Okay, reference you need. Everyone here seen the movie Glory with Denzel Washington? Glory, great movie. Even if you didn't see it, you probably, if you've ever watched the Oscars, saw the famous clip, right? Denzel, he's being whipped against this thing. He turns around, he blinks, and 8 tears fall down his face. I call it the Denzel octuple tear, trademark. Hold on to that, okay, right? Right? And it's that moment, like the tears fell down his face, and you were like, just give him 100 Oscars. Like, it's over. It's a wrap, right? So hold on to that, right? So I'm sitting there nose to nose. Everyone's waiting for someone to cross that imaginary line. I lean in, my nose almost touches it. You know when you're so close, it almost feels like you're touching, right? I blink, and 8 tears fall down my face. Everyone's like, is he kidding? No, that actually, this is not a metaphor. This is like real life, like nonfiction, okay? What do y'all think happened next? This is not a poem. This is like real life, so you can just be honest. I'm in Toronto. They're like, did he say sorry and move on? Nope, not what happened. Never been in New York before. What do y'all think happened next? He punched you in the face. You said what? He laughed. Those are two actually really good guesses. It's funny. I tell the story in New York, and nobody answers because they think it's such a dumb question. And they're like, he knocked you out, son. Surprise. Like, what? Why is this? This isn't even a story. All right. So the reaction he had, the way he reacted was more surprising than anything that I have ever seen, right? The tears fall down. And let me be clear, too. I didn't, like, back up, and I wasn't, like, fall into a little fetal position ball, which, I sometimes want the person to do in that situation, right? I leaned in like I was going to, like, headbutt him and then, like, drop Denzel on him, okay? So hold on to that, right? The tears fall down my face, and the dude's like, all right, chill, relax. Oh, my God, that guy's crazy. What the? People are falling over tables. They're falling back. Oh, chill. Immediately, everything's squashed. We leave the club, and my friend's like, yo, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. He's like, we're about to get jumped by 8 dudes, and you're trying to win an Oscar. What are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. And let me be clear. Not one thought went through my head when I leaned forward. Not one thought went through my head when 8 tears fell down my face. There are no thoughts. I wasn't trying to do some like Gandhi, Saul Williams, like 8th level. No. It just happened. And it became this story that we talk about. You know what I mean? We'd be out with some other friends, on like a Friday or Saturday night, having a few like, non-alcoholic beers. And we'd just be sitting there talking about life. My friend like, no, I swear. Like, we're about to get jumped by 8 dudes at 3 in the morning at this club. Carlos drops Denzel on them, and then we lived. It was crazy, I swear. And people are like, that's the dumbest and most ridiculous, false thing I've ever heard. That didn't happen. And even me, like, I had no clue what that was about. I didn't know what had happened to my body that made that happen. And then 2 years later, I'm 25 years old, and it clicks. And it's why I say that the body is the source of the greatest wisdom that we are capable of, and it's this. What makes us live in a world where the narrative of masculinity, the dominant narrative, the one-dimensional, toxic, patriarchal narrative of masculinity that so many of us, all of us maybe in this room, are familiar with in some way, watching it function in the world, that when two men who don't know each other, their bodies unexpectedly bump against each other, we all know that the next thing they have to do is to fight. And it's over nothing. Risk a life, take a life, maim someone, go to jail. I know nothing about this dude. This dude was a Latino dude, like he could have been Puerto Rican, my same height, my same build, and I know nothing about him. I don't know about a little 8-year-old sister who runs the door when he comes into his apartment and wraps her arms around his waist and gets dragged all the way to the living room. I don't know about his little cousin who always wants to buy the same shoes he wears because he worships him. I don't know about his grandmother who chops up broccoli and sings songs from La Isla and tells him how much she loves him. I don't know about the songs and the poems and the short stories he writes that he hides in a journal under his mattress because he was afraid of what it would make him. Just like I was afraid of the poems that I had been writing when I was 17. And we might as well have been the same person. And I feel like my body, in the blink of an eye, did all of that math. And it grieved for this agreement that I had made to follow this path. Because it's a path for all of our destruction. And that's why those tears came down. 2 years before I could understand it. And then I thought about something else. I said, why did people react like I had pulled a nuclear warhead out of my back pocket? Like people jump back like I'd been like, oh, actually, I forgot about the nuclear warhead. We all dying now. Like, boom, you know what I mean? Like people jump back like it was the end of the world. Like nobody laughed. Nobody clowned me. Like people were so visibly shaken by watching me lean in and like drop the Denzel tears on him. People's minds looked like they were going to explode. And I realized something else. I said, with violence being such a staple to the way that I've learned to be a man on all different fronts, emotion, softness, tenderness, emotional literacy, sensitivity, vulnerability, those are the things that we bury. And we try to let them die with us when we go. And that day I made a decision. I said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life as a man, as an artist, as a human being, challenging and deconstructing that one-dimensional, toxic notion of masculinity. And I said, and I thought about it, I said, okay, so I've been writing poems for a while at this point. I said, okay, cool, so I'll do it with poetry. I'll do it with writing. But where was the most important arena of transformation that I had to do it? And the hardest one? Yeah. Within myself. And that's the hard one, right? Isn't that tough? Like you watch a documentary, you have a talk with like a good friend, and they like open your eyes to something, and you're like, oh no, oh gosh, now I know, oh damn, well, can't play the, I didn't know that card, you know what I mean? Oh shoot, all right. And it was like really hard because then like I'd be playing basketball with my boys and people would be saying all this like misogynistic, homophobic stuff that guys playing basketball in New York say to each other. And I was like, can we talk for a second? And they're like, what? And I was like, can we like not do that anymore? And it's interesting, I had like one talk with like 3 of my good friends playing basketball, and they were like, you know what? They were like, okay. No, you're right, man. You're right. It was actually like not, you know, like when you think you're going to risk a lot, there's going to be like a high price to do something, and then there's like, feels like there's almost no price, and you're like, I should have done this like 10 years ago if I was a lot more aware and evolved. You know what I mean, right? And they're like, yeah, okay. And they just like stop. And then I realized too that I'd spent so long hiding from this like incredibly emotionally robust being that I had inside of me that I had to cultivate it. And I had to make friends with it. And I had to unlock it. And I realized this right around this time after the nightclub. It was a few months later, and I was in Los Angeles for a project. And I was working with this acting coach on a monologue from this play called I Never Sang for My Father. And so in this play, in the final monologue of the play, the protagonist, the main character, his father has recently passed away. And he's telling his father everything he never told him while he was alive. everything that he was grateful for, that he loved about his father, that he never was able to say. And so I got to the monologue, and I worked on it, whatever else. And so I got in front of my teacher the first time I'm like presenting it, right? Nobody else there, just me and my teacher, just me and my mentor, my guide, right? I get to the first word, and I'm about to say it, and I just cry for 15 minutes. And he just sort of sits there, and he's like, yeah, he's like, there might be something there to examine. I was like, yeah. I think I might have some daddy stuff I got to work on. So, yep, there's some stuff there with fathers I should probably get to at some point. And I realized, and I talk about this a lot in my book, that I had spent 9 years incredibly upset with my father about a whole range of things I will not get into here. But I realized that day that unless I was able to tell him how much he meant to me after I forgave him, I had a realization that I would never become a man. I would never truly become a man. And so I did this thing. I said, okay, cool. If my biggest fear is having the people I care about never knowing how much they mean to me, I did this exercise, like a letter writing thing sort of, and I recommend it for everyone here. It's the greatest gift you will give anybody that you love. I'm just going to promise you that right now. So just lock it in there. It's really simple, or you can write it down. It's an I love you because list. You take a lined sheet of paper, 24 lines on a lined sheet of paper, right? And 24 times you write, I love you because. You don't over-intellectualize it. You don't overthink it. You don't get like super, don't be like Stephen Hawking with it. Don't like reinvent string theory. You know what I mean? Don't even be too poetic. It doesn't even matter if it's poetic. But specific, personal, meaningful, tender things that you care about that person. I gave one to my mother. I gave one to my 2 sisters, my little brother, my best friend, my 3 best friends, my partner, and I gave one to my father. And I made sure it wasn't like on his birthday, it wasn't on Christmas, it wasn't some like event, you know what I'm saying? It was just like March 12th, you know what I mean? And I was like, hey, Poppy, and I was like seeing him, and I was staying over his house, and I was like, okay, Poppy, like have a good night, I love you. And I was like, oh, I have something I want to give you. He's like, okay, cool, what is it? You know, I handed it to him, and he like opened it up, and he was like, all right, have a good night. And he slammed the door and like walked out. I was like, okay. And he never mentioned it. For like a year and a half, he never said one word about it. Never brought it up again. And I was like, well, that went over well. Maybe he has some son issues, okay? And a year and a half later, I think it was actually right around Christmas, and I'm sitting there with my dad, and we're at this big party with a bunch of family around. I think it might have actually been New Year's maybe even. And we're sitting there on a couch, and he sort of puts his arm around me and starts like rubbing my shoulder, and he's kind of looking at me for a while. We're kind of smiling. It was like kind of like a tender moment. His eyes get a little misty-eyed, and he reaches in his jacket pocket, and he pulls out this like frayed old little sheet of paper folded up, and he unfolds it, and it's the I love you because list. And he travels all the time for his work, right? And he said, every time I'm lonely and I'm homesick, I read this. And that's why I keep it always right over my heart. And of course, I was like a sobbing mess like already. I wasn't even trying at that point, right? And so I started to practice breaking the conformity of how I learned to be a guy. And it was action, and it was written. It was rethinking the way I thought about my relationships with women, with my other guy friends, with my family. And there were different pieces of this. So one piece, one of the 2 big dimensions of it, was realizing how squeamish, now I did this experiment when I was in college, how squeamish people were about any sort of affection between guys. I mean, emotional intimacy, physical affection, right? Like anything that was perceived as being outside of this like heteronormative, cisgendered masculine performance was very much frowned upon, right? So the college that I went to, University of Pennsylvania, 2000 to 2004, anything more than the man hug and people would freak out. Okay, the bro hug. It depends what part of the country you're in. Do y'all know the bro hug, the man hug? You know about it? You know it? Do you want to show it to everybody here? You and me show it to them, everyone, real quick? Is that cool? What's your name? Kevin. Give it up for Kevin. All right, we're going to do it real quick. All right, so I'm gonna set the scene. Wait, here, go over here. You got to have a runway to work up to it. All right, so Kevin and I, we just we're benching and doing deadlifts at the gym for about an hour. We had some chicken wings for lunch, protein shake. We're gonna go meet up to chop wood later, but we got a part right now to go do our homework. All right, Kevin, good to see you, bro. Take care, man. All right, man. Peace. All right, get out of here. Give it up for Kevin. Yeah. You ever seen that moment happen? It's like, yo, Kevin, man, it's been cool being twin brothers with you and sharing the same crib. Okay, cool. Stiff arm. Don't touch my body. Oh, yeah, Dad. Hey, Dad, thanks for raising me and changing my diaper and putting me through college. Okay, cool. Stiff arm. Don't touch my body. Oh, yeah, thanks for being my mentor for the whole life. Okay, cool. Stiff arm. Don't touch my body. You ever see that happen? Like, whoa, don't touch the body, man. Whoa. What you doing, man? Don't want, like, an emotionally intimate, tender moment to happen, right? Don't want to actually, like, hug and kiss my brother. You know? Whoa, time out, man. So I did this experiment in my college. I said, I'm going to walk down the main walkway of campus, Locust Walk in West Philadelphia, and I'm going to not change anything else. Not my dress, not my talk. I'm not going to create some like Daniel Day-Lewis character. Like, I'm just going to walk through the main walkway of campus for 1 hour holding hands with my friend Gino. So fingers interlinked, right? Like most of the guys on the way to class at Notre Dame, right? And just see what happens. You know what I'm saying? And this true story is the poem about what happened in that hour. And it's called Hand Stitch. And it goes like this. I'm holding my friend Gino's hand and asking the Army recruiter for more information. About the Marines, please, I say. He fidgets with his cufflinks, paws at his necklace through his shirt, drags the back of his hand across the close-shaven sandpaper of his chin. Gino is staring him down. Through the eyeliner he wears like a middle finger, we watch this stranger, caught between the train movements of a machine and the churned butter in his body, just like mine. 2 months before, when I said hell no to a trip to the gay club. I just don't want to lead anyone on. It'd be like colonizing the space. I said, which sounds a lot better than I'm uncomfortable. I wouldn't know how to stand. What do I do if a song I like comes on? In Zambia, I walk the dirt roads of a slum. My pinky finger, intimately wrapped around the smallest digit of the most infamous guy on the block. He was my friend. It is how friends walk the streets there. When I greet my Iranian friend's father, we embrace cheeks twice. In Thailand, my host casually patted my leg at the first family dinner. I nearly jumped out the window, thinking he was reaching for something else. Everyone laughed, probably confused as to why this strange foreigner had been trained to be so foreign to the gentle touch of a man. A passerby gives me and Gino matching names. I tongue the word around in my mouth, feel the tender sting make a home in my torso, stare at the word brotherhood splayed across a camouflage banner. The recruiter stares down at the table, as though it holds the secret code to life's great questions. His corrected stutter and slightly overcompensating stance blend into the decorations behind him, so much so that I can barely even tell he is still there. He pretends as if we are not, begins sorting and then resorting the 3 lonely pamphlets dwarfed by the large rectangular table where they now sit. Boys, seriously, please, I'm just doing my job. His mouth begs in a voice so small and so human. It makes me feel like I have just blurted out a secret. This man has given his life to guard, like freedom. I'm almost at the end, but before I end, I have 2 pieces left. I want to say a huge thank you first and foremost to Christine Karen Gebhardt, the director of the Gender Relations Center. I don't know if she's here, but give it up for Christine. Yeah, give it up for Christine. If you don't know her, you should know her. I don't know her, but I think I'm going to meet her hopefully soon, and I'm excited for that. I want to say a huge thank you to Mo McKenney. Do you all know Mo McKenney, who's right next to her? She's wonderful. She picked me up and gave me a wonderful tour of your campus. Clap for Mo. Yeah, she's awesome. I want to thank the Department of Film, Television, and Theater. I want to thank the Institute for Latino Studies. I want to thank the Multicultural Student Programs and Services. I want to thank the Gender Studies Department. I want to thank WABRUDA. I want to thank the Sociology Club, Duncan Hall, the Latino Student Alliance, and Men Against Sexual Violence, especially Derek, who gave me a beautiful intro. Where are you, Derek? I don't know where you are. Oh, there he is, right here. So give it up for them. They're amazing for making this happen. And last but certainly not least, somebody who I met at a conference, I think it was last year. He's an amazing, beautiful, powerful, incredible man who does great work at the school, along with Christine, along with Mo, along with all the organizations I mentioned. And he was a big champion for bringing me. Give it up for Emmanuel Kennedy. Give it up for Emmanuel Kennedy right here. And give it up for yourselves for being on a Monday night, coming to some student programming, and just being so alive and so present. Y'all are beautiful and amazing. Give it up for yourselves. Give it up for yourselves. I have 2 more pieces left. I'll talk a little bit about my book before the last piece that I do. But that has like the full journey without like the Cliff's Notes that I've given tonight. It's like a much grittier, much more real, much more comprehensive journey. Do you all have you all ever heard of First Year Experience Common Book? Do you have that here at Notre Dame? First Year Experience Common Book, first seminar, a book that all the students incoming read? You don't do that. Okay. Well, if you get a copy of the book, in 2 years when you have that program instituted, if you feel Man Up Reimaging Modern Manhood, I'd be grateful if you recommend it. So give it up for that. Give it up for that. So there is an epidemic that I feel like has been happening in the world for millennia that seems to be escalating with technology and with younger kids having access to technology and having us live in a world that is hypersexualized and sexist and patriarchal and chauvinistic and et cetera. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? What am I talking about? What just happened? Yeah, I was being cryptic. Just yell it out, whatever you think I'm talking about. Pornography, absolutely. Pornography could be a piece of this. It's even bigger than pornography. It's even higher level. Pornography is under that umbrella. Most pornography, I would say. What? Media, sure. Media is a huge messenger of this. I feel like even in the last 7 or 8 years, there's been like an escalation of horrific acts of violence against women and girls. Does anybody else feel like that? And this is just coming from me as a man, and I have no clue what it's like to walk through the world being a woman. I don't know how the women in this room are able to do that. But I see these like news stories, horrific examples, microaggressions, all these things. And I wrote a poem that's my plea. It's my desperate plea to so many of the men out there that I know they're well-meaning men, and I know they're men who want to break conformity, and I know they're men who want to live outside of the box of masculinity, of this sort of heteronormative, toxic masculinity, but they don't know how to step outside of that conformity. And so I wrote a poem, and it's about my horror at seeing the world that my older sister Sarita lives in, and my 17-year-old little sister Maita lives in, and my wife lives in, and all the women that are very near and dear to my heart, and all the women in the world, seeing you move through the world and seeing what you have to deal with, and feeling this sense that I want to pull my arms around all the guys, and exactly what Derek was talking about, and say, how can we shift the culture of being a guy where being destructive in general is not a staple of the way we learn to be men, but especially this way that so many guys bond. I realized this when I was questioning the ways that I had taken for granted how it was supposed to be a guy, that so much of it centered around being destructive to women. Can any guys relate to that? I mean, like, you look around and you're like, gosh, it feels like everything we do to bond is like, you know, you go to the bar and you're like, what's up, man? Oh, Kevin, what's up, Kevin? We'll go back to Kevin because we're just coming back together after, you know, lifting weights or whatever we're doing, right? So Kevin, yeah, we're at the bar. We're like, yo, man, you're looking good, right, man? Why don't you go talk to her? And then it's like, well, what else do we talk about if we're not doing this? I don't know. You know what I mean? I had that realization. I was like 23. I was like, I don't know what else to talk about. This is really sad and pathetic. So I wrote this poem. I want to give a trigger warning before I read this poem. I talk about sexual violence. I talk about rape in this poem. If you put on a headset, if you walk out of the room, if you close your ears, I'm not going to take it personally. It's 3 minutes long. And this poem is called When. And it goes like this. When a woman's body is a riddle, to solve or steal the answer for. When her voice is only heard in 2 volumes, too soft or too loud. When for too many women it's neither. The sound is turned off. When she's overqualified, underpaid, overworked, understated, then overlooked when it's time for a promotion. When a passed out 16-year-old girl becomes a forgotten city wall, a blighted building, a blow-up doll. When rape becomes a fashion critique, then a sob story about 2 football players losing their way, when owning your own body is understood when it comes to me. But still in federal appellate courts for my wife, my 2 sisters, 6 aunts, every mother, daughter, woman in this room right now, but your smiles are not non-consensual, your frowns a negligent mother. When the miracle of a woman's body is mandated into flaw, because old men who drink together say it is so, who bend and invent words they use as proof, claim politics, claim law, claim religion. When my 7th grade student gets catcalled on the way to school by a middle-aged man and everyone in the room giggles, rolls their eyes, calls it Tuesday. When women are called girls, girls are called young women. An 11-year-old in Texas who was gang raped by 20 men is called seductress, called a spider who lured them in, called anything but human. When Delhi, when Eastern Congo, when Steubenville, when U.S. Naval Academy, when your basement, while you were refilling chips during the Super Bowl, when will men drop their arms? Stop using bodies as weapons or props. Pry open our rusted gates, remove the masks, offer the world our softness. When will hands exist to hold instead of take, mold instead of break? When will our tears stream baptism, chest be shelter, lips a front door, my throat first and foremost, made for song, made to say the words, I love you, I'm sorry, beautiful, I'm scared. I'm so tired of breaking, of being anything but the shaking magic in my gut. Please, just hold me, please. I love you so much. I have one final piece that I'm going to do. You all have been so wonderful. I want to honestly say it. It's a Monday night. It is a Monday night in South Bend, Indiana. I'm sure there are a million other incredibly amazing things happening right now that you turned down to come here. But I want to tell you, and I really mean this, I'm a big proponent. I mean, I feel like in terms of also learning to be expressive and emotionally literate and available and all these things, to tell you all that I'm not even being funny or being silly. I know I've been very silly at different points tonight. But my life will be better because of this hour that I've shared with you. And I want to say thank you for that. So give it up for yourselves for just making my life and my night better. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, make some noise. Facebook or Twitter. I'm going to make you a deal, okay? If you tweet me or if you reach out to me on Facebook, I promise I will personally respond to you, okay? I promise I will personally respond to you. If you have a bad memory, write this down. If you have a good memory, it's really easy to remember. You can find my Facebook or Twitter through my website. It's just carloslive.com. So Carlos, I'll give you a mnemonic. Carlos, the really easy to spell Spanish name. Even if you're not fluent in Spanish and are a horrible speller like me, Carlos, just like it sounds, right? Live, what happened right here in Cary Auditorium, one word, carloslive.com. Carlos what? And just to let me know you're not a serial killer or a stalker, just so I'll make sure to respond to you, just put hashtag NDBeautiful, okay? Hashtag ND what? Beautiful. Why? Damn right, because you're all beautiful. I'm going to be out here after this last poem. There's some copies of my book out there. And just to be clear, the book is called Man Up, Reimagining Modern Manhood. Wherever you identify on the gender spectrum, it is a book that is not only for men. And a lot of the people who connect to the book or resonate with the book, a lot of women, people who are gender nonconforming, trans, men, all across the spectrum. Ultimately, it's like the most, it's like the unauthorized, behind-the-scenes look at what is happening inside of a guy's mind, heart, and soul. One of my female friends was like, gosh, she had this on-and-off relationship with this guy for like 10 years. She was like, if I had read this book, I would have saved myself a decade of anguish. Because guys don't talk about this stuff. But really, ultimately, it's just like a gritty, raw ride of how do you carve out and find permission to be who you inherently are, your fullest, your best self, in the face of a world who is oftentimes telling us that we have to be anyone else but that person. And that's something that I think can resonate with anybody's identity or story wherever you fit in the world. This final poem I'm going to do, and P.S., if you don't want to buy a book, don't worry about it. Just come up and say hi. If you want a picture, you want to give a pound or a wave, I'd love to meet you. This final poem is inspired by my little sister, Maita, who I mentioned earlier. She's 17 now. And she taught me this really powerful lesson about my identity when she was 11. Maybe you have a really wise 11-year-old sibling or niece or nephew. I'm talking about the 11-year-olds that have like an 8,000-year-old grandmother who lives inside them. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know those 11-year-olds, right? They're like, do or do not, there is no try. And you're like, what? Like, I just saw Star Wars. Oh, okay. That's still deep. You know what I mean? And so she taught me this really powerful lesson where I learned to read very late. I was 9 years old when I learned to read. And I was very ashamed of that for most of my life. And I didn't tell my little sister this until she was struggling with reading and writing when she was 11. And I was like, yeah, you know, like, Maita, I struggle with reading and writing too. She's like, no, you didn't. You're a writer. And I was like, no, I actually did. She's like, no, you're just saying that. I was like, no, I learned to read when I was 9. She was like, that's amazing. And I was like, no, not the word I'd use, but yeah, okay. She was like, no. She's like, that's completely amazing. She's like, you are a writer for a living. You spend your life writing. Why would you be ashamed of that? It's what you do. You should tell every audience you're in front of that you learned to read when you were 9 years old. So if there's anyone in the audience who struggled in school, who got made fun of for being a slow reader or a late reader like you, will know that they can be a writer. They can do anything they want in the world. And I was like, thanks, 11-year-old. That actually makes a lot of sense. That's really wise. Okay. So I dedicate this to anyone in this room. If you ever struggle with reading and writing in school, if you're ever called slow or special ed or stupid, all those nicknames I used to get called along with Maita, I dedicate it to you and to all the powerful girls and women in the world who help teach and open up and sort of guide men like me back to ourselves. And it goes like this. My little sister likes to read Harry Potter books. We'll spend an entire afternoon doing nothing but something she's not supposed to be able to do. Don't be fooled, though. By the fluttering pages in her palms, she's channeling Da Vinci, inverting words like a fresh bruise. Turn tangerine orange, she picks the ripe hurt from a swaying branch in a chapter. And we both hear Albert Einstein's words echo up from the floor. If you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. My little sister Maya likes to read fairy tales. Has always loved fantasy. It's where we built her playground. She is Leonardo minus the mirror. It took years for people to read what everyone thought was Da Vinci's own invented language when all he did was just right backwards. And just like Einstein and Leonardo, Maya has a gift. Some don't think so and call her dyslexic. She is a genius to her. Coded like the paragraphs her potent mind distills, but while kids repeat monotone words from a teacher who might as well be a cartoon parrot, or a doll's audio-recorded voice, or a hooked-on phonics tape acting as a babysitter while kids stuff their mouths with dull letters and muted sounds, Maya is in a daydream. They try to beat her down with a 4-letter acronym baton, but she's too busy directing the orchestra with her magic wand, a symphony of mixed chlorophyll-tinged pastels, constellation framed with songs of a summer breeze-drenched field. Maya's dancing in an open clearing in the woods, scrawling out recipes with Mozart in sweaty rooms of overcrowded notes. She calls it a curse. I tell her it is a gift. There is nothing wrong with you, Maya. She asked me who with dyslexia has ever really done anything besides this Leonardo da Vinci or Albert Einstein. And I answer, well, I guess no one else really. I mean, besides Pablo, Picasso, Anne Bancroft, John Lennon, Auguste Rodin, Ansel Adams, F. Scott Fitzgerald, George Washington, W.B. Yeats, Agatha Christie, Muhammad Ali, Maya. Your mind is a gift of greatness. I'd rather see the page like you. Imagine all of the possibilities at once, the paragraphs unhinged, each sentence released by the first hinted promise of a word. It's promise to make us free. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks.
Whew, I'm ready to go set the world on fire, aren't you? Yeah, let's do this. Thanks.
I forgot we had a Q&A, so maybe I jumped the gun. Yeah,
we don't have time for Q&A,
cool.
though. But,
I'll be outside.
Yeah, but absolutely. But Carlos is going to be outside. If you loved him and if you want to read about him, pick up his book from the bookstore. But if you just want to stop by, say hi, give a fist bump, he'll be right there as well, too. A couple of notes for you before we leave. Again, this is our kickoff event for Stand Against Hate Week. So if you love this and if you want to see more of it, pick up a flyer as you leave the building here, too. But the conversation that we have had tonight, is about what does it mean to be our truest and fullest self? And we're starting to do some of that on campus here. In 7 of the male residence halls, we have men's talking groups already. And that's an hour retreat where the young men basically get to take some time to really just relax, talk about some of the things that really matter to them, and then just get down to the nitty-gritty of it, what it means to be man here specifically at Notre Dame. We're actually having one of those events at 10 o'clock tonight in Duncan Hall, and any man in the room is invited. Carlos will be there too, facilitating that conversation about what it means to be a man here at Notre Dame. But if you don't have something like this in your hall, and if you want it, come let me know. I'm up in the Gender Relations Center, so stop by 311 La Fortune, and we'll make it happen. And for the young ladies out there, if you want something developed within your residence hall, between residence halls as well, let's get that conversation going, because the more we can talk about kind of what is gender on campus, the more we can address some of the issues that are out there as well. Yeah, that's all I got. So thank you very much for, and evaluations. I'm getting a signal from the back. Please fill out those evaluations. Those are very important to us. If you don't have a pen, meet a friend and share a pen. So there's your motto for the evening. But yeah, thank you very much. You can hand those to the lovely ladies over here by the door. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Study hard.